I request.
So the pointer is there, and there is one more bottle of water. Okay, good.
I request Professor Ramgopal Rao
He will use his pointer
to deliver his acceptance speech. Thank you.
I'll also give my talk, right?
Sure.
I would like to thank ACCS and CDAC for this honor. I think it's huge. I have received many awards, but I think this award is special because Sadagopal and many of you are involved in this. So I am very honored. I should tell you, maybe one of those days, Professor Kincha called me some night at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. He said, "I want your CV urgently," kind of a thing. And so my wife was sitting next to me. I said that no, she doesn't know Professor Kincha. I told her that somebody who is very eminent and distinguished wants my CV from Bangalore. And my wife's immediate reaction was, "I am not going to come to Bangalore," because she she thought that he is asking for CV for some position here, some director position or something. She said, "I have already come from Bombay to Delhi. I am not going to now come to Bangalore," kind of a thing. So I was also confused. Why is he asking? But then, because they were not really very happy to go to Delhi from Bombay, so they're always worried that what will I do next, kind of a thing. So which is so thank you very much for giving me this honor. So I will not make anything very technical. I will just give you a glimpse of my journey in the last almost 15 years, and I am not going to cover anything that you have read in the citation, because I am not talking about anything that I have done with the semiconductor industries, but this is other 50% of work that I have been doing of late, and so that's what I will share with you. To me now, in the current position, when I look at the national kind of a scene, if you look at the R&D status in India, India is actually doing very well, despite what we may claim or what we may think about ourselves, but India is currently ranked 5th in the world in terms of, I think I will use yours, you had the, okay, that's good, okay. I just use the laser out of this, okay. Yeah, okay. So India ranks 5th in the world right now in terms of its research output, which is pretty good. But if you also look at the rate of growth of our scientific output, the publications basically, we are growing at 14% as against the world average of 4%. So we are the fastest growing country in terms of research output. At least we are also among the 3 in terms of the rate of growth. And at this rate, India will be ranked 3rd in terms of scientific output by 2030. In fact, many people believe that even by 2027 or so, India should come to the 3rd position, and it will be China. Of course, China is at number 1 now. Then comes US, and then comes India. So right now we are at the 5th position, but the 3rd is definitely possible. And but we are already number 1. Number 1 in the dollars spent per dollar spent. How many papers we can write, because we are not investing enough in science and technology. The India GDP wise, we are only investing about 0.6, 0.7% in terms of GDP on the higher education. So we don't have enough money, but whatever money that is given to us, we do make the best use of it. So we write more papers than anybody else. And in fact, yesterday I was talking to some Japanese funding agency which funds postdoctoral fellows. If you are looking for postdocs, you should recruit postdocs from India, because these people can write more papers than anybody in the world. So you give them money and they can give you papers. I think so. But this is actually a fact. This is all based on the data. So per dollar spent, we write more papers than even Chinese. So that way we are pretty optimum. But even in terms of nanotechnology, certain areas like nanotechnology, India is already at the 3rd position. So that is also something which is very noteworthy. And so now, given all of these kind of facts, so now what next now? So in terms of publications, we are doing well, and since US and China are spending much more than what we are doing, I think overtaking them is going to be difficult for some more time. But I think for whatever money that is spent now, so we seem to be doing quite okay. but in nanotechnology, since we are already in the third position, so since my talk is going to be focused on nanotechnology, just one slide crash course. I also assure you this is the only equation I will use. There are not going to be any other equations in my talk, but this is also a very simple equation. I'm sure all of you will know this. So what is nanotechnology really? The nanotechnology is, you take all these materials in the periodic table, right? You now start reducing the particle size. You make a powders of all of these materials. You start reducing the particle size of these powders. Now, when you start reducing the particle, you treat this particle, for example, as a sphere. So this particle, you treat it as a sphere, and then this particle therefore has a surface area 4 pi r square. It has a volume 4 by 3 pi r cube. Therefore, when you take the ratio, the surface to volume ratio for this particle will be 1 over r. So the smaller you make these particles, the larger is going to be the surface area and smaller is going to be the volume. So therefore, volume will decrease and the surface area will increase. Now, if you look at any properties of these materials, any property which is linked to the surface area therefore will enhance, any property which is linked to the volume will degrade. So magnetic properties, for example, will degrade, whereas some of the stiction and other properties will friction kind of properties will enhance. So that is what will happen with this particle just because of the size dependence. By reducing it, you will anyway eventually achieve this 1 over r ratio kind of a thing. So therefore, now if you look at a slide like this is something which we have done in our lab. So this is a tiny chip, 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter kind of a chip. Here we are growing very tall nanowires. Each one of them is a nanowire, a dense forest of nanowires. Now you start measuring the surface area of this particular structure, you will find that in 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter chip, you can achieve surface areas which are equivalent to that of a football field. So in 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter square chip, you can now achieve one entire football field equivalent of surface area by growing this dense forest of nanowires. So therefore, if you are looking for some surface area enhancement for an application, this is the best way to do that. If I am looking for a sensor which will react with the surface and give me some signal, then your signal output will be maximum, just because of the maximum, the highest increase in the surface area that you can achieve at the nanoscale. So therefore, the size dependence is one thing which is of very great importance for nanotechnology, which comes mainly because of this surface area thing. But if it is just the surface area thing, nobody would have spent so much of money in nanotechnology. The field wouldn't have taken away, would have become so important, the worldwide kind of thing. There is also a science. So when you go to these nano size particles, when the particle sizes become 10, 20 nanometers, at that scale, these particles will lose their bulk property. Now the bulk properties of all the elements in the periodic table are very well documented. Even in textbooks, we know all the properties of these bulk materials, the bulk properties of these materials. At the size scale of 10-20 nanometers, when you make these particles, then they start to show now a changes in the thermal properties, mechanical in some of these kind of material properties now. So different materials show different changes in properties at the nanoscale. Now for example, take the case of silicon dioxide. Now if I take the silicon dioxide, 1 micrometer silicon dioxide is a perfect insulator. You apply 1000 volts across 1 micrometer, a good quality silicon dioxide, you cannot even measure the current. The silicon dioxide is known to be such a good insulator for all practical applications. The same silicon dioxide, now you make it 1 nanometer thick. The film of silicon dioxide at 1 micron is perfect insulator that we know in the world. At 1 nanometer, it becomes a perfect conductor. The same material at 1 nanometer, it's a conductor. At 1 micrometer, it's an insulator. So that's because at the 1 nanometer scale, the quantum effects come into picture. The classical physics breaks down. The quantum tunneling, the two kind of phenomena enhance in these materials. And you apply even 1 volt now, there will be a huge amount of current that will start to flow. That is nanotechnology. So therefore, there are changes in properties and there are size dependent surface area as well. So therefore, there are two aspects to nanotechnology. And now the question that engineers are asking is, these changes in properties now, for example, if you take the case of gold, which is very well studied, at the nanometer dimension, it doesn't even look yellow. So it doesn't even have the properties that we attribute to gold at the bulk scale. So that is again, the gold is one very well studied material in the nano form. So now all chemists in the country, the material scientists in the country can produce all of these nano materials in the laboratory. They can produce, if you go to a good chemist lab, Bangalore has tons of them, so that they can produce 1 milligram, 2 milligram, they characterize these material properties, and they write papers, understanding the material properties. They even study the physics of that, therefore physicists also get involved. They look at why the materials properties are changing, and then characterize, compare the theory with the experiments, and they write papers. That sort of papers are written quite a bit from India. Now the other question that the theoreticians are asking is, if I can even, can I design these material properties from ab initio simulation? So for example, I want a material with these properties. Now can I design a material, because at the nanoscale, by arranging these atoms now, can I even play God? Can I start to create now materials for the properties that I want to have? And that we are still not there. And we don't know, we are still struggling to understand why these properties change. The physics becomes very complex at that scale. You need supercomputers to model at the molecular level, and in JNCSR, there are some top quality scientists who are trying to model these materials at the nanoscale. But we are there now, and chemists can produce them in milligrams kind of material. But as an engineer, if I want to start using these materials for some applications, what could be the application? At IIT-Delhi, there is a textile department, there is a faculty member who developed a nano coating which makes your fabric stain resistant. You pour coffee, nothing will stick to the shed, and it becomes antibacterial resistant even for the paramedics and the medical professionals. They want to have clothes which are antibacterial and all of that, and those sort of properties they can give to these clothes with the help of a coating. So that kind of work at IIT-Delhi, there is Professor Ashwini Agarwal. We are licensed it to lots of companies, and many companies are already using that. And then there are automobile companies which are trying to coat windshield of car with materials which make it super hydrophobic. Now if I can have windshield of car which repels water, which is a super hydrophobic property, even in monsoon you will not need wipers anymore, because no water will stick. It will be like the lotus leaf kind of an effect where the windshield will always be clean kind of a thing. And then there are people who are applying it to medical technologies, where the cancer treatment, the targeted drug delivery using nanomaterials is a very well studied area, where they are attaching drugs to these nanoparticles, and they are using the properties of these nanomaterials to target the cancerous cells. That way you don't destroy the healthy cells, you only dispense the drug to the cancer cell, and in the process destroy the cancer cells. Therefore the targeted drug delivery is a big area. Therefore, as you can see, from automobiles to textiles to medical, everywhere you see nanotechnology now. And so those applications are all based on these changes in the material properties, and it's a very excellent science understanding these properties. So whether the technology part of it becomes a reality or not, which is no longer a question anymore, because the materials are being used all over. But the fact already remains that it's a great science. So therefore nanotechnology is not something that will go away anytime. And all these materials in the periodic table, so people are exploring these applications and people understand them. But one challenge is, chemists know how to produce a few milligrams in their test tubes, but how do you now make them in larger quantity? Can you produce, one ton of these materials with exact size dependence? Now if I say 10 nanometer, it must be 10 nanometer, it cannot be 20 nanometers. So now can you produce these materials with exact size control? That is still a struggle. For some materials, the chemical engineers have come in and set up these plants out of the chemistry processes, but they are all struggling to maintain the quality and uniformity and all of that. But it's therefore a great technology too, and the engineers are coming in and asking those questions. For example, if silicon dioxide is a tunneling, is conducting now, if I have a tunnel conducting silicon dioxide, can I start to use it for a device? So can I start to implement it in a device application and do things which are otherwise not possible? So therefore engineers are looking at these changes in properties and correlating it with applications and trying to see, can I use this new property now to realize this application, which with the bulk properties was not possible. So therefore it's an exciting field. The engineers are looking at it, material scientists are looking at it, all engineering departments, science departments are involved, because the applications are so wide ranging. So therefore it's a great field to work, and all institutions now have excellent nano programs in the country. And India has set up, thanks to Professor C.N.R. Rao and then DST Nano Mission, there are multiple such centers in the country for for nanotechnology, where you can do very advanced nanotechnology. So India was nowhere in the picture before the nano area started, but now India, the publication count is continuously going up. So this is, though it is slightly dated, but we have only become better. In fact, we have become so better. USA, thanks to Trump now in the last few years, they are not growing much, but India is still growing at 14%. And now, according to some of the recent studies which were released by DST a few months ago, in another 3 years' time, we should be able to overtake US. So we will be now second in the world in terms of the knowledge generation in nanotechnology. So we now will write more papers than US when it comes to nano-related kind of a phenomena. So good things are happening. So these are all the nice things. And we are also filing more and more patents. The quality of these papers is also going up. But this is where the problem lies right now in the country. So this is a nice slide again which shows the technology. This is for the nanotech area, basically for the nanotech, the technology development strength versus the nanotechnology funding. So now they have put these countries into 4 quadrants: the major, the minor league, the niche players, the dominant players, and the ivory towers. And they are looking at now, as per the technology development strength, as per the funding provided, where do we fall? Now India, if you are searching where is it, we are at the close to the origin. So we have not spent much money still compared to the other countries. Though we think by our standards we have spent a lot of money, but it's by world standards it's nowhere close. While US is here, as you can see, we are here. So China has spent a lot more money, but when it comes to technology development strength, they are also in the minor league. And so how many of these countries are able to convert this science into technology, or science into something which is useful for the mankind and which you can get some commercial value out of that? And in that way, we are in the minor league. So we are all struggling to make money out of our research. So while we have become number 1 players in converting the money to research, money to publications, we are nowhere to convert that research back to money. I think that doesn't exist in the country. We have not been able to make money out of the research that we conduct in the country, and even in nanotechnology, we are somewhere here. The dominant players are all US, Japan, Germany, Korea. So this is where everything happens. Now we generate knowledge, they use the knowledge, make products, and sell it back to us. I think this cycle has been continuing for a very long time, and unless we start to improve our technology development capabilities, I think this will continue to be. We will generate the knowledge and they will make the money out of it. So that is how things have been so far, and this is one concern. So, but how will it change? I mean, who will change it? So if we, the academic institutions, are generating knowledge, I think somewhere the onus again falls back on the academic institutions to also do the technology development. So our institutions now, the startups and some of these, need to start doing it in a more aggressive kind of a scale. I'll skip this. So now having I'll also these are all the problems that exist, which is not really important for us. But so now we at IIT Bombay, when I was at IIT Bombay, so that we started to look at it in a slightly different way. So that we said, can some of us, because we have received all the awards now, I think there is nothing for us to get by writing papers. So now can some of us take that step? Can some of us go beyond writing papers? Can some of us start to develop products? Can some of us start to bridge that gap between the technology and the knowledge kind of a thing? So we started to look at things now from a slightly different perspective, and then we asked the question: so what is it that is required if you want to start a technology kind of a thing? Can we get that removed or something there? It's coming from laser pointer. Oh, projector is eating up. I see. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, that's good. Okay. I will use that. I think maybe you can just put this also inside, so that will be. Oh, it's already working. Oh, it's already working. That's great. So we started to look at now. So can we bridge that gap? So at IIT Bombay, we said now to do that you need to work like an industry. In industry, you don't do research hoping that some product will come out. I think you would have already thought of what to do, what product, what price point, and all of that, and then put a team together to realize whatever you are thinking of as a product. So now academic institutions need to work like industry. So that is what is required if you ever want to bridge that gap. So we said, can some of us do that? Because we have nothing at stake. We can now, even if we fail, nobody is going to blame us for anything. So we said, let us start to look at that now from that point of view. So that is the first time then some of us came out of our comfort zones. So we started to interact with people outside of discipline, outside of our domains. So we started to talking to the medical doctors, because IIT hospital is there, and many of these experts used to come from Tata Memorial Hospital and many leading hospitals in Bombay. So we got hold of some of them, and we asked them the question, what is that we can do for you? Is there something which you think if we develop will make it easier for you in your day-to-day kind of a practice? So once we started asking those questions, they gave us lots of problems, but one problem which became interesting for us was this cardiac diagnostic thing. So they said that when somebody comes to my clinic complaining of chest pain, it takes me at least 4 to 6 hours to diagnose what that chest pain is because of. I think just to understand the cause of the chest pain, I need to do lots of tests, and in the process I lose a lot of time. So can you guys develop something which is very simple, that somebody comes complaining chest pain, I take a drop of blood, put it on the chip, and then it will give me the required the protein concentration, so that I can decide quickly within that 1 hour what is happening, sort of a thing. So they said, how do you actually do that? And in India, why did we choose the cardiac problem? That is because India, every third patient, every third death occurs because of a cardiac failure. Even now in states like, this is a very recent study I am showing here, and this is a cardiac burden that one is plotting. The Kerala, for example, has the highest incidence of the cardiac deaths today, and as it can go up to 40% kind of a thing between the men and women. And so as you can see, every third death in India occurs because of heart attacks today in India. So now, can we diagnose people better, who are going through this heart-related kind of thing? So basically, like I defined, when you walk into a clinic with chest pain, in about 100 rupees in a few minutes, can you rule out cardiac problem? That if you can say that this chest pain has nothing to do with with the heart and is because of some other reason, then you go away kind of a thing. So this was what we started to look at as a product. And then, but how do you diagnose this cardiac patients? Because when the blood supply to the heart is restricted, these cardiac muscles start to die. And when they die, they release certain proteins into the blood. And these proteins are this troponin, CKMB, myoglobin. These are the proteins that they monitor in the hospitals today. And but each test, they have to send it to pathological labs. And now some of those point of care devices are appearing, but they are still very expensive. And I know that it's expensive because I recently had a little bit of a scare. One day while walking to office, I had a chest pain and a little bit of perspiration. And when you are director of an institute, I just made the mistake of telling my secretary that I am feeling a little bit uneasy and all that. And she promptly called the hospital. Then hospital sent an ambulance. They took me to the hospital. They did some ECG kind of test. Everything was normal. But then the doctor said that, no, we cannot take any chances. So let us, go to a hospital outside. They took me to a hospital outside, and then their doctors were all waiting, and they directly took me to the ICU. Then I went into ICU. They put on me all those electrodes and everything, started monitoring ECG. Everything was normal. They started taking these tests for troponin and CKMB and all of that. The reports came. It was also normal. But then they said, no, we cannot take any chances. So we should wait for some more time. So by evening, everything was normal. They said, no, we should keep you for overnight. And they kept me overnight. By morning, everything was normal. And then then they said, no, but we should do more tests, the stress test, this test, and all this. I said, no, I am going home. I will come back again. And but the doctor would say, no, but something can go wrong and all that. I said, I will go home, I will come back after a month, and we will fix up an appointment. I wanted to basically get out of that place. And then they finally said, fine. They prepared a discharge, and they printed the bill for that, and they gave me the bill. And then I started having real chest pain. So there was nothing before. And there was nothing before, but overnight in a big 5-star medical hospital in Delhi, you can imagine what that bill is. And IIT said, we will only pay you 80%, 20% you need to. But that 20% itself was my 1 month salary. So that is the issue today. So this is what is the problem today. And so that is where you want to have some of these simple tests. The question is, can we go to an MBBS clinic and get some of these tests done, kind of a thing. So how do you do that? So usually, in our academic institutions, we do a lot of research, publish lots of papers, but we are always we have a solution which is looking for a problem. So much of our research is already, we have imagined a problem, solved it, and then we start looking for, where can I apply it kind of a thing. So that is how much of our research happens. But for the first time here, we thought of a problem, we thought of a price point, we thought of where it will be applied, and then we wrote the block diagram. So that this was our very first work. You take the blood and then you filter it out, because to measure those proteins, you only need the serum, plasma kind of a thing. So you filter the blood, and then these are the sensors for the myoglobin, troponin, and all of that. And but all of this needs to be done on single chip, and since you are dealing with the blood, it has to be disposable, the entire chip, and this whole test should be about 100 rupees. Now there is a small tabletop instrument. It is like the blood glucose testing. So you have a strip and then you have a small instrument kind of thing. And so a lot of electronics goes here to monitor this, and this is a complete system that we wanted to develop. Then you need to now to filter this part. As electrical engineers, we know how to do that. But this is all completely new for us. So this required a mechanical engineer, this required biologists, this required chemists. There are at least 6 departments which were involved in developing this complete system. So we showed this diagram to them. We gave each of these to different people and started working it in a way that you want to. The final goal should be to develop the complete kind of a system. And then in my group, we started working on a simple test for the cardiac proteins, that you have a tiny micro cantilever kind of a device, and then when you put the reaction occurs between the protein, the cardiac protein, and the receptor here. When the binding occurs, the binding is what I want to detect electrically. That there will be a change in the electrical parameters depending on the amount of binding that is taking place on the surface. So then that was basically the platform, and then we started to work on developing the platform. There were a lot of nano principles that we applied here. We integrated nano wires into polymers, and so I will skip all of this. But after a lot of research that has taken place, so many of these are papers which we have published in top journals and conferences, and many PhD students worked on them. And finally, we were able to show a kind of a the output where for a given the deflection sensitivity, we showed a world record. We actually published it as a world record. For example, when the binding occurs between the cardiac proteins and the receptor, how much is the change in the electrical parameters in terms of parts per million? So that is what we are showing. We showed it as a world record, and then so we were able to do some interesting research out of that. Then with the help of other departments, we started to put it all together. The electronics we developed alongside. The electronics also gave us lots of good papers, because we were looking at very small changes in resistance, and we showed interesting concepts in measuring those delta R values with a 0.3 ppm resolution and all that. We developed ASICs for that, and then we finally, with the help of the IDC, the design center, so we were able to put together a first prototype which can actually detect the cardiac protein. So you open the chamber, put a drop of blood, and you can actually monitor that. We developed the second prototype. The ISENS stands for infarct sensor. It's because you are monitoring myocardial infarction. And so then we actually have the chip and all of that, and then we incubated a company, transferred this technology to the company and all of that. But the platform was able to detect the surface chemical reactions. Around that time, we had there was a bomb blast in 2008 in Pune, a terrorist attack, and that is when Principal Scientific Advisor Office contacted us saying that since we know that you are working on these sensors, can you use them for explosive detection? How do you do that? And subsequently, in fact, before I go to explosive detection at IIT Bombay, Professor Dinesh Sharma and his group, so we wanted a complete cardiac care, not just the monitoring those proteins, but even the ECG monitoring and all of that. So they worked on a small portable ECG monitoring system which can record for at least 10,000 patients and put all of that data on a chip. And then you can do today the AI algorithms to screen the ECG data and then identify who are the people who require some kind of a medical care. All of that was put together. It is battery operated and everything. So as a group, we came up with a complete cardiac kind of a care. And then, like I said, around that time there was a bomb blast, and the PSA office said that, can you develop sensors for some of these explosives? And then we took the same platform. Now the coatings are no longer for protein detection, but now they need to monitor the vapors of this explosive. Now what could be the coatings here? So we started to work with the chemists. because the chemists, with the help of chemists, we thought, can we figure out a molecule which will bind selectively to vapors of these explosive molecules. When there is vapor that comes and binds on the surface, the binding is what, I know how to detect the binding as an electrical signal, but that binding needs to be selective enough. That is where the chemistry comes into picture. So we again worked with lots of chemists, and we developed many protocols. We wrote lots of good papers to look at that selective binding and all that. But no single molecule can selectively bind to vapors of explosive. There will always be cross sensitivity, which was a challenge. So we said, can we follow the nose approach, the human nose? We are not selective to one particular smell. We detect all the smells, and then our brain can differentiate one smell from the other. So when you are trying to do something in the electronic side, why do we want to make everything selective? So why don't we follow how the nature has designed our noses? So we started to use multiple sensors here, and we will have multiple coatings on all of these sensors. So when a molecule comes in, an explosive comes in, it reacts differently with different sensors because they have different coatings now. Now you record all of that as a pattern, and this pattern you store it in the microcontroller, and that is what we did. And so it has a microcontroller, it has multiple sensors, it takes in the air, looks for these particles, each sensor will give a response, and the microcontroller takes all the responses, does a pattern recognition on them, and then identifies patterns for different smells, the different explosives. So that is what we developed. But this sensor you need to teach it, because it doesn't know what corresponds to, what pattern corresponds to what smell. So now there is a lot of library we started working on. We developed the pattern recognition algorithms. So a lot of work went into this again. So we started to train the system for nail polish, shoe polish. So because it has to be able to differentiate in a typical airport kind of a setup, it has to be able to differentiate, out of all of these from the explosives. So we started to develop this library and develop the patterns, and so a lot of work we did in pattern recognition and developing this library. And finally, this is how it is supposed to work. This is a working platform. It has almost like 80% selectivity in terms of detection. And the security agency, the guy can go with this and then start screening. It can replace a sniffer dog. That's the whole idea. And this we developed, and then we joined hands with the semiconductor lab in Chandigarh and the ECIL as our partner for making this system. So this is still an ongoing project. So we have sufficient number of prototypes which we are now going to work with the security agencies and see how to further improve that. But around that time we realized that with all of this training and all that, about 80-85% accuracy is achievable. But anything beyond that, security agencies said, if I go to Jammu Kashmir, and we interacted with lots of these security agencies, they say that, sir, wherever terrorists put a bomb, they actually create a foul smell around that. They put a lot of cow dung and all of that, and so that even the sniffer dogs will get confused. So that is what all these terrorists do. So these sensors, though they will have some application, but the way the terrorists usually operate, they will not just put a bomb and go away. They will create a lot of smell around it so that even the dogs cannot track them. And therefore your sensor, though it will be good for an airport kind of a place, but it won't work outside, and these were some of the issues. So we started to look at, so while this activity is going on, we started to look at, ask ourselves the question, what is the property of all these platforms I mentioned you are looking at a host-guest kind of a binding. You have a receptor which binds to a particle